Right, well, welcome to the second edition of the Growth and Cooperation series. Now we are on to our speakers. So our first speaker for today is Ms. Natalie Chung Sum Yue. Natalie is an environmental advocate and social innovator, born and raised in Hong Kong, currently pursuing an MPhil in environmental change and management at the University of Oxford as the Esther Yupik Lee Millennium Scholar. Inspired by a polar explorer at a young age, Natalie has devoted her life to climate action. At the age of 18, she co-founded VER Hong Kong to promote sustainable local tourism for climate change mitigation. Natalie gained multinational exposure in the environmental space through her work with the World Bank, United Nations, WWF, and Kaduri Conservation China. With substantial experience in climate education and sustainability assessment, Natalie has been appointed by the Hong Kong government as a youth member of the Council for Sustainable Development. She's also a founding member of the Hong Kong Youth for Climate Action. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today. And for all our audience members, if you have any questions for Natalie, feel free to ask them in the Q&A or the networking session. Natalie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much for the invitation, Iona and Suhan. So now I'll start my presentation. It's excited to see you all here and I look forward to your questions. Let me share my screen. Right, so hello everyone. My name is Natalie. As Fiona has introduced, I'm from Hong Kong, and today I'll share a bit about my own climate advocacy journey and through sustainable tourism. I'm wondering if anyone can hear me well. If you can hear me well, can you put a thumbs up? It's fine, right? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Natalie. Everyone can hear you.
Nice. So I guess when we think of climate change, we always see this kind of imagery, which is the Fighting for Future movement happening in Hong Kong. I know that the movement is very big across Europe and especially in the UK, and Hong Kong is just starting on it, and we're hoping to further step up the action through our work. And we always see a lot of local and global impacts related to climate change. I would like to share these two graphs. The first one is from WMO, showing some of the climate risk and extreme events as well as related impacts. We see that climate change is not just about sea level rise, but also droughts, people being affected by floods, ocean acidification, which affects coral reef, leading to coral bleaching. And it also closely linked with health and the pandemic, as we are all aware of. And this interesting graphic I got from Mary Hoff. It's talking about climate justice and vulnerability. The sizes of the circles indicate the level of vulnerability. The bigger the circle means more vulnerable. So the heart one actually refers to health impact, and the second symbol refers to weather disaster. We can see that a lot of regions in Africa are suffering from more adverse impacts compared with regions in the Asia Pacific. And of course, I would like to draw attention to the IPCC special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. We can see the urgency to decarbonize and to achieve net zero emission by mid-century if we want to limit our warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which will be able to save us from a lot of ecological and human disastrous impacts. And from a recent study in 2018, it shows that if we are able to actively decarbonize from now on, we are only spending 0.1% of the GDP, while inaction will lead to losing 30% of global economic production. So this is just comparing the economic value and how much cost we're putting in to decarbonize. And this is another very interesting research, which I found it very surprising. It says that actually only 10% of the COVID recovery funds can already support a Paris-aligned pathway. A lot of the countries have been putting in a lot of resources into their economic recovery package after COVID-19. But then if we're able to put just a small fraction of these resources into clean energy investment, we're able to already lead our world to a net zero pathway. This is a paper on Science, and you feel free to check it out. And before I start talking about my journey, I'd just like to share an anecdote where I heard from the US Secretary General Antonio Guterres at the Conference of Youth COI 15, which Serena was also present there. He said that our message must not be a message of despair, but a message of hope. He says that things can be done, the resources exist, and what is still missing is political will. And that is where youth initiative is extremely important. It also explains why I started my own climate journey, because I feel like as youths, we have the capacity and we have the power to step up the political will to demand government action with our stance and with our intellect, with our knowledge, and with our passion. This is just some work that I've been doing in Hong Kong, which I hosted a youth forum on long-term decarbonization strategy, organized for the Council of Sustainable Development. And after the forum, we submitted a report recommending Hong Kong to set a target to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And it was later adopted. So Hong Kong has already stepped on our own carbon neutrality pathway, similar to some of the more advanced city-states in Europe and across the EU. And in order to found my academic rigor, I began my journey at Oxford to study MPhil in environmental change and management. I think that having a further advanced degree would be able to help build that professional knowledge. So when we're negotiating with the government or when we're negotiating with expert organizations, we will be able to give them our own perspective, which is grounded in evidence and especially in science-based information, such as like having the knowledge to read the IPCC reports. And this is a concept which I learned from Oxford. The lady on the right is called Kay Rohr. She was the writer of a book called Donut Economics, how 21st economy should work, 21st century economy should work. It is an economy designed to thrive, not grow. Oftentimes we think that economy should be designed to keep growing, like GDP keep on increasing. But in fact, our planet has our own planetary boundary. It has an ecological ceiling. You can see that in the middle of the ring is the social foundation. If we're able to meet some of the SDGs, such as no hunger, no poverty, and after we're able to meet the social needs, we also need to be aware of the outer ecological ceiling. So in the middle ring, which is the donut ring, is where it's the most safe and just operating space for us humans. Some insights I got from COP26. COP25 last year, one message on climate resilience, which is important that climate change should be embedded into city planning and budgeting policies at all levels of governments. And another thing is connecting different smaller organizations and grassroots organizations for a consolidated movement, including small island states and least developed countries, as well as the indigenous communities, to mobilize the movement and amplify collective voice in the community. And the second part of the presentation, I'd like to share my own story of founding an environmental organization, education organization in Hong Kong, which started from a competition back in COP21, which was in 2015 when Paris Agreement was signed. And before talking about what my organization do, I'd like to share some figures with you. Of course, nowadays, COVID-19 banned us from traveling abroad, but in fact, before COVID happened, aviation is actually a significant contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. Looking at carbon emissions per capita, and we can see that per capita figure in United Kingdom, where most of us are in, is around 5.8 tons. But actually, a round trip from Hong Kong to New York is already 5.2 tons, which means that if you're taking one extra flight for that distance, it is doubling the average carbon footprint per person. And this was a projection made before COVID, which says that in 2040, there will be over 50,000 planes in use. But of course, like after COVID, the impact will be different. But then the impact caused by COVID is also short-term. So we still would like to keep advocating for it. And how is aviation linked with climate justice? Just taking the case of the UK, in fact, before COVID happened, 10% of the population is making over 60% of all flights. You can see that it's only a very small portion of people that are taking a lot of flights, and causing these kind of emissions. And for the necessity of air travel, according to research by Gosling et al. 2019, it says that 52% of the leisure trips, according to a study, was rated as very important and important, but then the other 48% lacked explicit importance. So why is it important to promote local tourism in mitigating climate change? We see that there's lack of multinational effort to control these kind of transboundary emissions, including shipping and aviation. And there's also lack of a visual system to display how much carbon emission is tied with aviation. For example, we won't know a round trip between, for example, the UK to Japan, how much emission is it? We don't have these kind of information at hand, so the public don't know about this. So through promoting local tourism and ecotourism, it is a bottom-up approach to raise public carbon literacy, especially emission from aviation, and provide alternative low carbon recreation for the public. So that was how I founded the organization FAIR, which is a homophone to the word, which means green in French, FAIR. It is a social enterprise promoting climate action and environmental education through sustainable local tourism. And these are our mission area. Through guiding eco tours and curating these kind of environmental workshops, we hope to lower carbon emission per capita, as well as raise environmental awareness among Hong Kong people. This is some of the work that we've been doing. We use experiential learning to enlighten and empower our community. This is a website that we run. You can see some of the attractions in Hong Kong, which we're promoting. Apart from just providing the touristic information, we're providing knowledge on the ecological system of that place. So hopefully when people are going, they don't just take photos or, like take the Instagrammable shots, but they're able to understand deeper the historical background of that place and how they can conserve with their capacity. Like, for example, don't step on the seagrass because it's part of the carbon cycle. And this is a book we published also on similar topic. And photos of the tours that we've been holding. The left one was at a community recycling station in Hong Kong. Just now in our breaker room, Rasal, one of the members from Pakistan, mentioned to us how important it is to raise awareness on waste reduction and recycling. So we were bringing people to these infrastructure to educate them the importance of circular economy, to promote these kind of reduced consumption, minimalistic lifestyle, as Iona mentioned at the beginning. So here are some of the work that we've been doing to connect other entrepreneurial organizations, local tour, and the academia. We're hoping to be the agency, the bridge between academia, the government, and corporate. So we're able to bring these kind of concepts related to climate change to embed into different sectors of the society to foster tri-sector collaboration. We are also very high in youth empowerment, hoping to train youth leaders for the next generation. So we're teaching youth through internship schemes and through fellowship program to connect them with mentors who are experienced sustainability professionals, inspiring them to take a similar pathway in the future. So to end, I'd like to share one quote with you that I very like. It's by Richard Bregman from his book, Humankind, A Hope for History. He says that a breakthrough of humanity is a nocebo. So what does a nocebo mean? Nocebo is the opposite of placebo. Like when you're taking medicine, there's a placebo effect, but nocebo is like, if you're thinking something is bad, then even though it's not that bad, it just keeps perpetuating the vicious cycle. If we want to tackle the greatest challenges of our times, from climate crisis to our growing distrust of one another, then I think the place we need to start is our fear of human nature. We always feel very hopeless, like looking at climate change, and it's just like some of my friends are encountering climate grief because we feel like the problem is so large scale and we're not able to do anything as youths. But I'm sure that as youths, we still have a lot of outlets to push our world towards carbon neutrality. So here are just 4 simple action points that I think we can all start by doing. The first one is to form coalition for policy research and advocacy. Although there are already a lot of existing organizations doing research around the world, but actually some of them are even like funded by lobbying groups, which might not be very neutral. And as youths, we have our individual capacity to use our knowledge and the capacity and resources to do research that really reflects the science and to convince the governments through evidence. And another way is like similar to what I've done, bottom-up education of the general public through really bringing them out to nature so that they understand that people connect with nature to reconnect and to regain that human nature link. The third one is to actively engage in consultation exercises. If you happen to live in a country where they consult you on, for example, climate policy or environmental policy, be sure to grab the chance. And last one, of course, we can all reduce our carbon footprint through energy conservation, diet change, waste reduction, just simply buying fewer clothes. And I'd like to close with this quote from Larry Brilliant, which says, "Change starts with ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and the path to extraordinary is open to anybody at any time." So I'm sure all of you from the audience are able to make small and big changes in the community. And no matter how insignificant it is bringing a huge impact to our planet and bringing our world closer to net zero. So be the agent of change. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the sharing by Serena and the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie, for this wonderful speech. I do look forward as well to the questions afterwards. But before that, I would like to welcome Serena Bashal. Serena is currently the program coordinator at COI16, the 16th UN Climate Change Conference of Youth, which is the official youth precursor event of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, otherwise called COP26, which is going to be held in Glasgow in November 2021. Her multifaceted experience includes serving as a global focal point to YOUNGO, the formal youth constituency to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, advocating as a youth delegate at 9 UN conferences since 2016 through the UK Youth Climate Coalition and the African Youth Climate Hub, and sitting currently as a youth representative on the UNFCCC Technology Executive Committee Task Force. Serena will be joining the renewable energy sector in September, since she firmly believes that the clean energy transition plays a key role in achieving mitigation targets. Serena, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And also, how amazing was Natalie's presentation? So inspiring, I loved it. Okay, so my name is Serena Bashal and I'm 23 years old from the UK. I'm from London. I've been a youth climate advocate for 5 years now, and I really, really love the space. I've also just finished my maths and biology undergraduate degree a few days ago, and I studied at Keele University in Staffordshire. So today I'm going to be exploring some youth activism for climate action. But first, I would like to briefly talk about why this session is so important. Firstly, the importance of climate action. Well, I'm sure you've all heard this many, many times by now. Global greenhouse gas emissions are completely destroying the natural environment, posing devastating consequences for nature and society. Extreme droughts and high temperatures are setting countries on fire. Island nations are sinking, biodiversity is shrinking. Life on Earth is facing its 6th mass extinction. In conducting climate action, a multi-stakeholder collaborative approach is absolutely vital in order to account for all voices in mitigating and adapting to the climate crisis. This ties in very closely with the idea of climate justice, where different demographics are disproportionately affected by climate change. Now, why is youth involvement so important in climate action? Well, youth are, in my opinion, the most key stakeholder, since we will be inheriting the planet and society, including society's climate action efforts and the significant climate change impacts. By building our capacity and educating ourselves on climate action, then when it comes to taking leadership positions in today's society, we can really deep dive into taking action on the issue and make significant changes to current models to ensure that we are preventing the problem at the roots and adapting to its impacts that we are too late to prevent. Young people are constantly living in fear and anxiety, worried if we will ever get to see a future. We need to ensure that intergenerational equity is included in decision-making processes. We want to ensure that the Earth's resources are utilized in a sustainable manner for all future generations to be able to survive and thrive. Now, since we are the next generation of leaders and we are currently at tipping point, we have a duty to the planet now to do everything we can to champion climate action. Just going to share my screen. Another reason actually why it's so important to include our perspectives, aside from it being our future at stake, is that climate change impacts are considerably uncertain and can be quite unpredictable. Thus, we as a society need to ensure that we are always one step ahead of this continuously evolving global change. Young people can bring so many fresh ideas, new energies, and most importantly, innovative, novel solutions that perhaps haven't been thought of previously. Young people are innovators by nature. We're so creative and we have so much to bring to the table. This is why I love working in the youth climate space so much, is that you just get to see so many amazing ideas and processes, all for this common goal of climate action. So before I begin, I would like to conduct a little poll. And my question to you is up on the screen. Hold on, I have a function here for it somewhere.
Would you like me to launch the poll
Yes,
question?
please. Yes, please. So if you could just answer this poll, and then we can see where everyone's at. Okay, got some answers coming in. At the moment, it's a little bit confident is the most popular. Okay, so we have a mixed bag. Mostly you guys are a little bit confident and quite confident. So it's somewhere in the middle we're looking at. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. And you should be able to see this. Okay, let's leave that there. So let's move on. I'm now going to just take you all through different methods to engage with climate action, and let's start on the local level. And all of these are actually how I engage personally. So I'm hoping this can really inspire you all to take action. So starting with the local, you've got universities and schools, your local borough, the city. So at unis and schools, you can really get involved with your sustainability committee. So for example, I sit on the School of Computing and Mathematics Sustainability Committee at my university. We meet once a month to talk about our engagements, presented my work to the head of school, and also really trying to push integrating climate change into the curriculum now. Also, you can make carbon and energy reports. So this is something that I'm currently in conversation with the university's energy manager about, is about creating a carbon and energy report for the student union so that we could really assess strengths and weaknesses. And this came from I was chairing a Solve Climate by 2030 panel event here, which you can see. And this person here, Elliot, is the uni's energy manager, and that's how it started. Another thing you can do with your uni or school is write your dissertations and essays on the subject. And the idea here is to really educate yourself so that when you maybe come across a decision maker or an expert, you can have this really in-depth conversation. So these were my two dissertations because I do two subjects at uni, biology and maths, and yeah, very much aligned with climate change and sustainability. Let's move on to local council and borough. It's very easy to just strike up a conversation with your local councillors. So in London, we've just had an election. So I'm currently in conversation with the new councillors about spending the £1 million climate fund in my local borough, in my area, which is Waltham Forest. And anyone can do this, it's not just me. And we're also talking about making some local volunteer things, like making climate action training packs for local institutions. Quite simple to do. Also in the city, we have London Climate Action Week. And this year it will be from the 26th of June to the 4th of July. So it's coming up. And if your city or area doesn't have one, make it happen. It's a really great way to mobilize and bring people together to discuss things in this very specific and relevant local context. Here's just some pictures of me at London Climate Action Week events in 2019. Let's move on to the national level now. So there are loads of ways to get involved here: NGOs, conferences, governments, and the private sector. Let's go through them. So the UK Youth Climate Coalition is my NGO. I've been with them for 5 years now. This is how I entered the space. And it's a national NGO. The mission is to mobilize and empower young people to take positive action for climate justice. In the UK Youth Climate Coalition, or UKYCC for short, I sit on the COP delegation. So this is how I attend COPs in the UN. Here's a picture of us, actually, one of our delegations at the UN one time. And actually, it's really nice to be able to be in this kind of NGO that has such a good platform, because this picture down here was a call with loads of different youth organizations. It was like a building connections kind of call. There were about 30 different organizations represented. It was amazing and really, really awesome discussions. So let's talk about one of our campaigns that we're doing at the moment in the COP working group is this Global Voices to Glasgow campaign. And this is a fundraising drive. What it is, it's a sponsored walk, run, cycle, whatever kind of distance covering method works for you. And currently we've covered 2,540 kilometers and raised £1,510, which is super, super amazing. And all of this money is going to go directly to Global South and Indigenous youth to bring them to COP. Basically. So yeah, that's that. Another one I wanted to bring your attention to is this really, really funny prank. So this wasn't my working group, this was a different team in UK YCC, but basically it was a campaign to just make the public really aware of the hypocrisy of the UK government from conducting a liquefied natural gas project in Mozambique. So what UK YCC did is created this completely fake natural gas project, and created brochures, petitions, a Facebook protest, all completely fake. And then very, very quickly, these posts gained attention from the media and from the residents. Oh yeah, so the area is here, St. Ives in Cornwall, really, really beautiful, picturesque town. And there was someone saying this made them feel ill, it was ruining the whole beauty of the coastline. And yeah, so a great prank there to bring it to attention. Another thing is the local conferences of youth, or LCOI for short, and anyone can do these, any country can do these. In 2019, they occurred in over 50 countries, and it really focuses on creating these regional alliances and sharing knowledge and fostering a really local community of climate activists. And here's a picture of LCOI UK that happened in Manchester. Also, when you engage with these NGOs, you can do collaboration. So for example, UK YCC a couple of months ago collaborated with the Overseas Development Institute for a climate finance webinar. And then a couple of years ago in 2019, we collaborated with Amnesty International UK on a youth climate and human rights summit in London, which was a lot of fun. Another thing you can do is attend national conferences. So this conference happened actually just this week. Some of you might have attended this. It was every day this week. It was called Climate Expo, and it's one of the official kind of precursor events to COP26. And this was an online conference, and UK YCC did a session here on youth engagement and campaigning in light of COP26, and it was a lot of fun. And then when you work nationally, I think it's really, really important to engage with lots of different types of stakeholders, which is why I think working with the private sector is also quite important. And one thing I'm doing here is working with Ernst & Young on their Climate Change Future Leaders Board. And this works in tandem with a climate business forum. And so the climate business forum is where there's lots of big businesses and senior leaders on that side. And then our side is the young leaders. And they kind of work in tandem. And what we as the young people are doing is creating a really, really impactful statement / recommendation on how these businesses on the other side can really, really raise climate ambition and just be better, more sustainable. So now let's move into the international sphere. And this is the last one now. So loads of different things here, which I've listed, which I'm now going to take you through. So let's start with the UN Climate Change Conference of Youth, or COI16 for short. And this is one of my favorite projects right now. I actually just got off 2 meetings with them earlier today, but I love this group so much. So COI16 is an event under the banner of YOUNGO. Well, all the COIs are under YOUNGO. And YOUNGO is the official youth constituency of the UNFCCC, or UN Climate Change. And this COI takes place right before the annual UNFCCC COP in the same host country as the COP. And the COI serves as a space for capacity building and policy training in order to really prepare young people for their participation or even just their interest at COP. So in 21, COI will be in its 16th year and is dubbed as the largest and longest running youth event to date, gathering thousands of young change makers from more than 140 countries. It's likewise hailed as the most significant youth gathering for its capacity to directly forward the official youth policy position in the UN climate negotiations. And this policy document will be crafted by youth voices globally. We also have official endorsement by the COP26 team, the UNFCCC, and the UN Secretary General's office. And you can see these are actual letters, they're just screenshotted here. So yeah, really awesome. And so I'm one of the coordinators of COI16, and we are currently looking for UK-based volunteers. So if anyone wants to get involved, you can see the volunteers, opportunities, and contact info on our website. It's just ukkoi16.org. If you just Google COI16, you'll find it. But if you want a more direct connection, you are very welcome to text me on WhatsApp, and I can give you some advice on where you may be able to help us. And I will list my number at the end of this presentation, which you can text me on. Let's move on to YOUNGO. So as I said, YOUNGO is the formal youth constituency to the UNFCCC. And this is where youth can really directly engage with the UNFCCC, both on ground and virtually throughout the year. And YOUNGO is a fantastic international network of amazing youth climate advocates from across the globe. And at the UN, we do so much. So just some pictures here. Here's me with Greta. Here's all of us with Patricia Espinosa here. Here's a group of us in New York at the Climate Action Summit. Here's us with Jayatna, who's the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. And then let's just go on to some more pictures because I had to show you guys this. So on the left here, here's an action. This was on health. This is inside the UN at a UN conference. And here again, this is an action on human rights, again, inside the actual UN. Here is an amazing intervention we did at the closing plenary of the negotiations in the UN. Here, this person here is Adriana. She used to be the UNFCCC Action for Climate Empowerment focal point. Here again is a briefing with Patricia Espinosa. Here is a bilateral meeting with the UK delegation. So here's Archie Young in the middle. And here is a meeting with the PGA, the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. So yeah, so much goes on here, and it's really amazing to be a part of. And here are some other ways of how you can join and engage with YOUNGO. So there's the ACE working group. Oh, by the way, there's about 30 different working groups, and ACE working group is one of them. ACE is Action for Climate Empowerment. Here are the 6 pillars that make up ACE. One thing we're doing as part of this working group is organizing a youth forum. And that's a lot of fun. You've also got the oceans working group. So we do webinars and different projects surrounding oceans. There's also the human rights working group. We do some collaboration with UN human rights. And recently I coordinated a submission titled with this very long title. It was just about the environment and food systems. At the UN, I also like to always organize these human rights breakfasts. So we do this every UN session. Here's a picture of it. Also the technology mechanism working group. So this is one of the things happening here is advocating for youth seats on UNFCCC boards. And this is one of their task forces is what I sit on as the youth representative. And then there's the African Youth Climate Hub. And this is not under YOUNGO, it's in partnership with YOUNGO. It initiated in 2019 and is organized by the Mohammed VI Foundation. It really, really enhances global self-participation, capacity building. It's 2 physical hubs in Morocco. The digital hub has a climate academy, jobs portal, e-learning system, massive open online courses on climate literacy, and currently a 6-month incubation program with hands-on support and tailored workshops to meet the needs of the selected African startups. Also, you can work with government youth advisory boards, and if you don't have one, then make one. So I'm currently working with the government of Brunei to make one for Brunei, and this is, we want to make them in all the different countries in Southeast Asia region and make them all collaborate and connect as one. Another thing you can do is really champion climate education, and you don't need to speak the same language as an international group to give something to an international group. So for example, in about 2 or 3 hours, I'm giving a presentation on bees to some high school students in Mexico, and I don't speak any Mexican languages, but I have a live translator, and it's really cool because I get to just explain this even though I don't speak the language. Last thing, and then I will wrap up, is the nationally determined contributions. These are binding for all countries, and they're under the Paris Agreement, and they really regulate the implementation of the climate targets in these countries that are under the Paris Agreement. And it's really essential that these NDCs are formulated in a fair and ambitious way. So this project, Youth Rising Up for NDCs, or YUP NDCs for short, calls for fair and ambitious NDCs in order to anchor a forward-looking and climate-just climate policy in them. And in this project, young people work in country groups where the youth from big emitter countries work together with youth from the regions most affected by the climate crisis. And they work together and really analyze the NDCs of the big emitter countries and then use this analysis to call for changes for fair and ambitious NDCs. And if anyone wants to join this, you are also very, very welcome. Just Google YUP for NDCs, and then you will find it. So this kind of brings me to the end, and honestly, there is so much that you can do for climate action. And all of these examples, like I said, I have just drawn from my own projects that I'm working on right now. So you all know that these are just completely accessible to anyone. And yeah, I hope maybe this presentation has inspired some of you to maybe take part a little bit more. So thank you for listening. And here's my contact info, in which you are all welcome to get in touch through.
Thank you so much, Serena. I think you provided us with so many different options that I wasn't even aware of. In case anyone had the question of how can we get involved, I'm sure that your presentation answered it. So now, if you wouldn't mind just, okay, yeah. We're going to have a Q&A session. So the way this is going to work is if you'd like to ask a question, just use the raise hand function, and I'm going to name you, and you can just ask away. So if you have any questions to either of our speakers. Or alternatively, since there's quite a lot of us. Oh, okay, Mariam, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you so much for Serena and Natalie being here and giving these amazing talks. It was really inspiring and informative. I think my question, and this can be for both of you, but maybe applied differently. But I was wondering, especially for Natalie's presentation, when you were talking about local tourism and such, in terms of general environmental advocacy and activism work, how do we make an effort to be more class conscious? I guess is my question, because I think there's definitely this class disparity when it comes to climate change and the impacts of climate change. And so it's like mostly the people contributing to climate change, taking these long flights, going on these luxurious trips are from a very different class than the people that are being affected in these low-income communities who don't have the luxury to go on these trips, right? And so they're not actually contributing as much to climate change or pollution, but they're the ones being most affected by it because of where they live. So I just really thought of that when I was hearing Natalie talk about the local tourism and stuff. But I think this can apply to Serena as well in terms of like youth involvement and how to be class conscious about that, because obviously youth come from these different backgrounds, and a lot of times youth that don't have access to these programs as easy access can feel like the environmental movement is not for them or doesn't have a role for them. So I guess just kind of combating and addressing that class conscious conversation.
Right, maybe I can take it first. First of all, thank you so much for the question. I think it's very on point. I guess like maybe Serena can address it from the youth perspective, like youth movement perspective, but from my perspective of how we do environmental advocacy, I think sometimes indeed it would be kind of like guilt trapping people, especially those who are wealthier, like how we're shifting the blames on them, saying that they are taking all the flights and they are destroying the planet. But we are trying to convey the message in a way that it's not just telling them not to fly, but showing them what's good about Hong Kong or what's good about the local assets here. So it's taking the other approach instead of making people feel guilty about what they do bad for the environment, but then maybe telling them what's the perks of having a minimalist lifestyle. It's not just for the planet, but it's for your own mental well-being, or it's for your like reduce your obsession to materialistic needs. So I think this is how we kind of reoriented. Initially, we tried to tell people how bad it is to fly, but in the end we started to take another approach of helping people to reconnect with nature, just bringing people to out there and to see for themselves what's good about being in nature and how do they build the connection with different species and understand the importance, intrinsic value of nature. So this is our attempt to kind of address the class need and to convey the same message to different people. and maybe Serena can fill the gaps with the youth movements one.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. And it's a great question, Mariam. And I think actually in UKYCC, my NGO, there's an entire working group dedicated to this kind of thing called the Systems Change Working Group. And this idea about classism in the movement, it's very much about changing the entire system, going right to the core. The whole thing needs to change, really. And you need to recognize climate action and climate change as it's so integrated with all of these different social issues. You know, it shouldn't be treated in a silo. It just kind of affects everything. You know, there's everything you need to tackle. It's racism, sexism, ableism, classism, and just whenever you're doing your advocacy, just really recognizing that oppression exists. Oppression exists in the system, it exists in the space, and just always ensuring that all of the actions are very, very inclusive. And you know, just recognizing it and taking action on that. And this comes also, I think, is so important to have education in schools, and that's why I really like to champion climate education and environmental education, because when you, as Natalie was just touching upon, that when you kind of really can go straight, you know, when they're young, teach them right to the core, and it really, really sinks in and builds this kind of connection with nature and this passion for nature. So yeah, that's my answer. That was quite long-winded. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you for that. Next up, we have a question from Ali.
Hi, thank you everyone. Those were amazing presentations. I used to live in Hong Kong, and so Natalie, I just love the tack that you're taking to get people interested in the beautiful nature that is actually there, that so many people don't kind of appreciate and make the most of. So yeah, super uplifting. And Serena, yeah, I think like somebody else said in the comments, wow, I didn't know there was so much going on, and it's really inspiring and really uplifting to know that there's so much going on. But I don't really have so much a direct question as really an invitation, because I'm part of a project called the childrensfire.org, which is something that is going to happen for the G7 summit, but also going forward. And what it is really what all of you are touching upon, and that is kind of a universal demand that our leaders and all the people who are in positions of government and authority to make those important decisions, that in fact, no decision is made if it does not serve the children. And that's the children of all living creatures, not just human beings, but the children of this generation and all the 7 generations going forward. And that kind of universal wisdom was something, you know, pre-industrial age and pre-colonization, that was at the heart of most people's lives. Like no communities would make decisions that did not serve everyone. And so as it's in such alignment with all the wonderful things that you guys are doing, I wanted to share that with you. I wanted to, join this Zoom and share that with you and encourage everyone to get on board with the childrensfire.org. And it's really about giving everyone a voice as well. It's about saying, well, actually, leaders making decisions, these are the things that people want. These are what the children want. They don't want to continue with pollution. They don't want to continue with unsustainability. They don't want to continue with division and inequality. They want to have a complete change. And I feel it's really at the heart of everyone, young and old, to care for the young and to provide situations, structures and environments that encourage flourishing, not the kind of short-sightedness that we have seen decisions being made upon. So check it out, childrensfire.org. And thank you everyone for what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Ali. Sorry, Serena, go for it.
Sorry, I just wanted to say also thank you for that. And I'm so happy you praised that, Ali. And it's so refreshing to hear this coming from yourself. And I completely agree with what you're saying. It has to serve us as the young people, because it's our future, you know. If it doesn't serve us, then who is it serving? It's just serving maybe a current generation, but then that's not sustainable for the future of the planet.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. I feel like it is a human sort of universal human understanding that no decision is a good decision if it doesn't serve the children and if it doesn't lead to like well-being in the future. You know, I think that collectively we're all beginning to realize that we can't and we don't actually want to go on with the current system of, you know, just a small handful of people benefiting from the decisions that are made. That's not sustainable, and that's not something, you know, it's like I feel we're all capable of more, and I think we all really feel that we are capable of more. We're capable of making decisions that serve all of life, not just a tiny handful. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Ali. I quickly looked up the organization, so I hope the link is correct. It's the Children's Fire .earth.
.org. .earth. Yeah.
Yeah. So to everyone, please check it out and get involved if you can. Next up, Quinn, your question.
Hey, yeah. So my question is kind of, we spent a long time, like the whole climate movement, trying to get governments to declare climate emergency. And I mean, they finally did, and that's all great, but they aren't really doing a lot about it. So what can we do as kids and get the governments to do something about it? That's my question.
Should I answer this? And also, now that Natalie's gone, if anyone else wants to jump in and answer this, because I'm sure there are some other experts here, but I would say we have to keep the pressure up. I mean, look at what happened when the Fridays for Future movement really, really took off. There wasn't, back in 2018, 2019, there was actual targets and things that came out, like the EU chief, I think, proposed to unveil billions and billions of euros purely to go on climate action. And then also we had London's first ever climate action week in 2019. And so use these kind of successes and these really great things that have come out of youth action to keep the spirit up, firstly, and recognize that putting pressure on the governments does work. It does lead to some really great outcomes, and it does actually, I don't know, get them to do stuff. The second thing I would say is really deeply educate yourself, because you know when you're talking to someone and their expertise becomes really apparent, it becomes clear that they know what they're talking about. And when it's clear that someone really knows what they're talking about, you listen, you switch on and you think, oh wow, this person, what they're saying, it makes sense. I want to listen to this and I want to take it on. That's why for me, climate education for young people is so important. And it's just important that we have to build our own capacities. If no one else is going to do it for us, we have to do it for ourselves. Really educate ourselves. Make sure you know what you're talking about. I think I mentioned this in my presentation. So if you do ever come across a government person or a person in power, just talk and let out all of that amazing wisdom in your brain. And if you have learned what you have learned well and you really understand it, they will listen. Come up with some kind of target. So one example, so I'm talking for a really long time, I'll stop in a moment, but one example is my math dissertation at uni. I did this on, I made renewable energy forecasts, and then I calculated CO2 emissions from this, and then linked this back to the NDCs under the Paris Agreement. And the plan here is to really push this to the governments and say, look, this is what this renewable energy, or this is what this solution can do to meet the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. And if I can really explain it well, they will listen to me. So that's my answer.
Thank you for that. We'll have Laura and then one last question from Mauro.
Hi everyone, how are you? So I'm Laura. I am a Generation Equality Forum youth activist from Venezuela, and I constantly engage with the Action Coalition of the Deaf in climate justice. So I wanted to bring up a point and also hear your opinion on it about youth being in a driver's seat. So recently we've seen some more efforts from the UN and other important organizations realizing, like Serena mentioned earlier, that, you know, there's nothing, I mean, we cannot actually achieve big changes without the youth, because we are the ones who are bringing the hard questions. We're the ones who are bringing the innovative and creative solutions. And that's what we need to do things different and hope for real change. So between this or within this initiatives from these organizations and opening spaces for the youth to open or like raise their voices, like the ECOSOC Youth Forum, even the GEF itself, and so many others, I realized that, you know, these are really great spaces for the youth to participate. But an issue that I don't think we are addressing is the lack of representation and diversity in these spaces, especially during the pandemic, with so many people without access to technology to raise their voices, to ask their hard questions, to use their social media, to advocate for climate change. So I wanted to bring up that point because I think we're making progress, but I think that until we don't have equal representation from every group and we give visualization to every single demand, then I don't think we're going to make real change. So I wanted to ask you about what you think about it, and what are your hopes, or I guess kind of like, yeah, what are some things we can do to push for that diversity?
I think everything you just said is 100% true, and I completely agree. You know, you can't tackle climate change without climate justice. This is what you need. You need this equal representation. And it just makes sense because climate change affects everyone, right? It doesn't just affect, I don't know, the people in the global north who have complete easy access to this kind of space. It affects everyone. And actually, it's the people who have the least access to the space who are impacted the most. And yeah, I just think it's so crucial. And actually, because I'm a climate justice activist specifically, and so I have a bit of a bubble, but every climate justice or most climate activists I know really push for this and really try and champion this idea of global South participation and equal representation. And this is something I really try and encourage in all of my spaces. And I think this is what everyone needs to do, because change, if you can really practice what you preach, is what I'm trying to say. And if you can make this change in your own spaces and maybe start a domino effect, maybe one other person in your space will learn and they'll take it to the next space. Just one example is when I was doing my COI 16 conference meeting earlier today, we were talking about the high level speakers. You know, we want people like, I don't know, Al Gore, Patricia Espinosa, David Attenborough. And the thing is, a lot of them are old white men, and we were kind of really lacking, firstly women, but secondly global South representation in the high level speakers. And this is something that we said, okay, we have to do something about this. We can't just have one woman, that being Patricia Espinosa, and we can't just have one or two global South people. That's not okay. So yeah, that would be my suggestion, is everything you do, just make sure it's so inclusive and representative, and push these ideas on other people. If a group is just, I don't know, a big group of white men, say this is not okay, this needs to change, and we are going to make this change.
Thank you very much for that. And Mauro, you had one last question to ask?
Yes, thank you very much. My question is towards Natalie. Essentially, Natalie, in your presentation, I believe you mentioned that 10% of all travelers are responsible for 60% of the emissions. And I just wanted to ask you, basically, first of all, I just want to say that's an amazing statistic. And I just wanted
Mauro, sorry, just to interrupt. Natalie has left the call actually. She
Okay.
unfortunately had to attend another meeting.
Okay, then not a problem. All right, then I will proceed to send the feedback form. Okay.
No problem. Yeah, it's a shame she couldn't stay for longer, but we're at a time with lots of meetings going on. So yes, my colleague Mara is going to send a feedback form just before we go into the networking sessions, just so we get an idea of how you found the event so far. And now I'm going to put everyone in breakout rooms again, and I would heavily encourage you to exchange details, exchange ideas, get together, make friends. Our special speaker, Serena, is going to move from one breakout room to another to have the chance to speak to as many of you as possible. And yeah, I think because now it's 11 past, we're only going to do 2 sessions just to give you the chance to meet different people. So I'm going to make one session of 10 minutes, and then you're going to come to the main room, and you can then go to a different group for 10 more minutes. So that being said, feel free to join now, and I'm going to stop recording as well.